The morning sun streamed through the tall glass windows of Westfield International Airport, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor. It was just before 8 a.m., and the terminal buzzed with the familiar chaos of travelers rushing to their gates, the aroma of fresh coffee mingling with the scent of sanitizer that had become standard in airports worldwide. Among the hurried crowd moved a woman in her mid-30s, dressed in worn jeans and a simple gray sweater that had clearly seen better days. Her dark hair was pulled back in a practical ponytail, and she wore no makeup or jewelry except for a thin gold wedding band. Nothing about her appearance suggested wealth or importance as she pulled a modest carry-on suitcase behind her, occasionally stepping aside to let harried business people rush past. What made her different from most travelers was her calm. While others checked their watches and fretted over departure times, she moved with unhurried grace, pausing occasionally to help a fellow traveler pick up dropped papers or point someone toward their gate. She didn't look like she belonged in the luxury section of one of the world's busiest airports, but that's precisely where she was headed. The woman approached the entrance to the Diamond Sky Lounge, an exclusive area reserved for first-class passengers and elite frequent flyers. 2 glass doors marked the entrance, with a sleek counter staffed by a young man in his 20s, wearing the crisp navy uniform of the airline. "Good morning," she said softly, her voice almost lost in the airport's background noise. The attendant looked up from his computer screen, his eyes quickly scanning her from head to toe. His gaze lingered on her scuffed sneakers and the small coffee stain on the sleeve of her sweater. The corners of his mouth turned down almost imperceptibly. "Can I help you?" he asked, making no effort to hide the skepticism in his voice. His name tag read Assistant Manager. "I'd like to enter the lounge, please." She placed her boarding pass and a membership card on the counter between them. The attendant barely glanced at the documents. "I'm sorry, but this is a private lounge for our premium customers only." He slid the cards back toward her without checking them. "I understand," she replied patiently. "I have the necessary membership. It should be right there on my card." The attendant sighed as if dealing with a particularly difficult child. He picked up her membership card this time, giving it a cursory glance. "This doesn't look like our current premium cards. We've updated our design last month. I'm afraid this isn't valid." A slight frown crossed the woman's face. "That's strange. My husband renewed it just last week. Could you please check your system?" "My last name is Chen." The attendant's fingers hovered over his keyboard for a moment before he withdrew them. "Ma'am, this lounge is for passengers who paid thousands for their tickets, not for people trying to sneak in with outdated or fake credentials." The woman's eyes widened slightly at the accusation. "I assure you my credentials are legitimate. Please just check your system." "Look," the attendant said, lowering his voice and leaning forward. "We get people like you all the time trying to get free food and Wi-Fi. I don't need to check anything. I know the real cards when I see them." A flush crept up the woman's neck. "People like me? You know what I mean." He gestured vaguely at her outfit. "This lounge is for our premium customers who understand the dress code and standards we maintain." An older woman seated nearby at the reception desk looked up with a frown but quickly returned to her computer when the assistant manager glanced her way. "There's no dress code mentioned in the membership guidelines," the humble woman said, her voice remaining calm despite the growing tension. "And I am a legitimate member. Please just verify my information." The assistant manager's patience was clearly wearing thin. "Ma'am, I've made my decision. The general seating area is back that way." He pointed toward the crowded main terminal. "If you don't leave now, I'll have to call security." "That won't be necessary," she replied, gathering her documents. "But I would like to speak with your manager." "He's not available right now," came the quick response. "And honestly, he'd tell you the same thing." The woman stood her ground. "Then I'll wait for him to become available." The assistant manager's face hardened. "No, you won't." He pressed a button on his desk phone. "Security to Diamond Sky Lounge entrance, please." A couple seated in the lounge near the entrance exchanged uncomfortable glances. The man half rose from his seat as if to intervene, but his companion placed a restraining hand on his arm and whispered something that made him reluctantly sit back down. Within minutes, 2 security guards appeared, a tall man with a shaved head and a shorter woman with her hair pulled back in a tight bun. "Is there a problem?" the female security guard asked, looking between the assistant manager and the woman. This person is trying to access the lounge with invalid credentials and is refusing to leave, the assistant manager explained, emphasizing the word invalid with a dismissive wave toward the woman's card. The woman shook her head. My credentials are valid. He refused to verify them in the system. The male security guard stepped forward. Ma'am, regardless of the situation, if the lounge staff has denied you access, you'll need to come with us. Could you at least check the system? She asked, turning to the female guard with a look of quiet dignity. My last name is Chen, Chen. The female guard hesitated, glancing at the assistant manager, who shook his head firmly. I'm sorry, ma'am, she said. We need to ask you to come with us. The woman looked between the three of them and then nodded slowly. Very well. As the security guards began to escort her away, she turned back to the assistant manager. You've made a mistake today. Not because of who I am or who my husband is, but because you chose to judge someone based on their appearance rather than treating them with basic respect. The assistant manager rolled his eyes as she walked away, already turning to greet a loud businessman in an expensive suit who had approached the counter. The walk through the busy terminal felt impossibly long to the woman. Fellow travelers stared as she was escorted by security, some whispering behind their hands. Despite the humiliation burning in her chest, she held her head high, her expression composed even as embarrassment threatened to overwhelm her. Where would you like to go, ma'am? The female guard asked when they reached the main concourse, her tone noticeably softer now that they were away from the lounge. I'll be fine here, thank you, the woman replied, gesturing to a row of seats near a large window overlooking the runways. The guards nodded and left her there, the female guard casting a final curious glance over her shoulder. Once alone, the woman settled into a hard plastic chair, placing her small suitcase beside her. The general waiting area was crowded and noisy, a stark contrast to the peaceful luxury of the lounge she'd been denied. A child wailed nearby. A group of teenagers played music too loudly from a portable speaker, and the announcements blaring over the PA system made reading or resting nearly impossible. She pulled out her phone and stared at it for a long moment before making a call. Hi, she said when someone answered. There's been a small issue at the airport. She paused, listening to the voice on the other end. No, everything's fine. Just a misunderstanding with the lounge access. Another pause. No, please don't worry about it. I'm perfectly comfortable waiting here. She glanced around at the crowded terminal with a small smile. Really, it's not a problem. After ending the call, she pulled a worn paperback from her bag and opened it, seemingly content despite her surroundings. Occasionally, she would look up to help a lost-looking elderly man find his gate, or offer a tissue to a mother struggling with a runny-nosed toddler. Meanwhile, back at the Diamond Sky Lounge, the assistant manager had already forgotten about the incident, busy catering to the demands of a celebrity whose private jet had just landed. The older woman at the reception desk, however, kept glancing at her computer screen with a troubled expression. She had quietly looked up the name Chen in the system after the incident, and what she found made her stomach twist with anxiety. Across the airport, a private jet was making its final approach to the runway, its sleek form catching the sunlight as it descended. Inside sat a man whose name appeared on the world's most influential people lists, whose technological innovations had changed how the world used energy, and whose net worth could buy the entire airport and still have change left over. What the airport staff didn't know, what the arrogant assistant manager couldn't have guessed, was that this man was coming for his wife, and he wouldn't be pleased to learn she was sitting in a crowded terminal instead of the comfortable lounge where she belonged. The general waiting area of Westfield International Airport was a world away from the Diamond Sky Lounge. Instead of plush armchairs and quiet conversation, there were hard plastic seats and the constant chatter of hundreds of travelers. The air smelled of fast food and cleaning products rather than the fresh pastries, and premium coffee served behind those glass doors. The woman who had been escorted out sat quietly with her book, though she hadn't turned a page in 20 minutes. Despite her calm exterior, the humiliation of being marched through the terminal by security guards still burned. She wasn't angry about missing out on the luxury. She had never cared much for such things even after marrying into wealth. What bothered her was the assumption, the quick judgment based on nothing more than her appearance. A child of about 6 years old wandered near her seat, looking lost and increasingly frightened. The woman set her book aside and leaned forward, "Are you okay?" she asked gently. The little boy shook his head, his lower lip trembling. "I can't find my dad." "I'll help you look for him," she said, standing and offering her hand. "What does he look like?" "He's tall and has glasses and a blue jacket," the boy said, gratefully taking her hand. "Let's find someone who works at the airport to help us," she suggested. She led the boy to a nearby information desk, where an attendant quickly made an announcement over the PA system. Within minutes, a frantic man in a blue jacket came running toward the desk, scooping up the child with visible relief. "Thank you," he said breathlessly to the woman. "He was right beside me, and then I turned around and he was gone." "Kids move fast," she said with a warm smile. "I'm glad you found each other." The father nodded gratefully before hurrying away with his son, leaving the woman standing alone once more. She returned to her seat, aware that it was nearly time for her flight. As she reached for her book, her phone buzzed with an incoming call. "Hello?" she answered. "I just landed," came a deep voice from the other end. "Where are you? Not in the lounge?" "No," she replied carefully. "There was a small issue with my membership card. It's really nothing to worry about." "What kind of issue?" The voice had an edge to it now. She sighed, knowing her husband well enough to recognize when he wouldn't let something go. The staff member didn't believe it was valid. He wouldn't check the system. A pause. "I see. Please don't make a fuss," she said quickly. "I'm perfectly fine waiting here. Our flight isn't for another hour." "Which lounge was it?" "The Diamond Sky Lounge, but really—" "I'll see you soon," he said, ending the call before she could protest further. She put her phone away with a slight shake of her head. Her husband was generally a reasonable man, but he had a strong sense of justice that sometimes manifested as righteous indignation. She hoped he wouldn't cause a scene. Meanwhile, at the private aviation terminal on the other side of the airport, a sleek black car had pulled up to meet the passengers disembarking from the recently arrived private jet. A man in his early 40s stepped out onto the tarmac. He wore a simple but clearly expensive charcoal suit, no tie, and his dark hair was slightly rumpled from the flight. He carried no visible technology, no phone in his hand, no smartwatch on his wrist, though the innovations he had pioneered were used by billions across the globe. The driver opened the car door for him, but he shook his head. "Change of plans," he said. "I need to go to the main terminal." The airport's VIP liaison, a woman in her 50s who had been waiting to greet him, stepped forward with concern. "Mr. Chen, is everything all right? We can arrange for your wife to be brought here if you'd prefer." "No, thank you," he replied politely but firmly. "I'd like to go to her." The liaison nodded, knowing better than to argue with one of the world's wealthiest individuals. "Of course. I'll escort you personally." As they walked through the private corridors that connected the VIP terminal to the main building, the liaison made small talk about the weather and the city's recent developments. Mr. Chen responded politely but seemed distracted, his mind clearly elsewhere. "May I ask which airline lounge you were trying to access?" the liaison inquired as they approached the main terminal. "Diamond Sky Lounge," he replied. "My wife was denied entry earlier." The liaison stopped walking, her professional composure momentarily slipping. "She was denied entry? But you're—" "Yes," he said simply. "I'll call ahead immediately," the liaison said, reaching for her phone. "No need," Mr. Chen said. "I'd prefer to handle this personally." Back in the general waiting area, the humble woman had given up on reading and was people-watching instead. Airports were fascinating places, crossroads where all types of people briefly intersected before continuing on their separate journeys. She observed a tearful reunion between long-separated friends, a businessman frantically trying to finish a presentation, and a young couple clearly on their honeymoon, too wrapped up in each other to notice anything else. At the Diamond Sky Lounge, the assistant manager was having a good day. After removing the shabby-looking woman earlier, he'd successfully checked in 3 minor celebrities and a well-known business executive. His supervisor had even complimented him on maintaining the exclusive atmosphere of the lounge. The older woman at the reception desk had been quiet since the incident with the casually dressed woman. She had tried twice to mention what she'd found in the system to the assistant manager, but he'd brushed her off both times, too busy catering to the needs of more suitable guests. When the glass doors slid open to admit a man in an expensive suit, accompanied by the airport's VIP liaison, the assistant manager straightened his tie and put on his most professional smile. He recognized the liaison immediately. She only personally escorted the airport's most important visitors. "Welcome to Diamond Sky Lounge," the assistant manager said smoothly. "How may I assist you today?" The liaison opened her mouth to introduce the visitor, but the man spoke first. "I'm looking for my wife," he said. "I understand she was here earlier and was denied entry." The assistant manager's smile remained fixed in place, though a flicker of uncertainty crossed his eyes. "I'm sorry to hear that, sir. Perhaps there was some confusion with her membership credentials." "There was no confusion," the man said quietly. "Only a failure to verify them properly." The older receptionist stood up. "Mr. Chen," she acknowledged with a respectful nod. "I tried to look up your wife's information after the incident. Her premium membership is indeed valid and current." The assistant manager's smile faltered. "Chen, as in—" "Yes," the VIP liaison confirmed. "This is Thomas Chen, founder and CEO of—" "That's not important right now," Mr. Chen interrupted. "What's important is that my wife was humiliated and removed from this lounge without cause." The color drained from the assistant manager's face. "Sir, I had no idea." "That's precisely the problem," Mr. Chen said, his voice still quiet but carrying an unmistakable authority that silenced the younger man. "You had no idea who she was because you didn't bother to check. But more importantly, you shouldn't need to know who someone is to treat them with basic respect." By now, several lounge guests were openly watching the exchange. The assistant manager was visibly sweating. "Where is your manager?" Mr. Chen asked. "I'll get him right away," the assistant manager stammered, practically running toward the back office. While they waited, the older receptionist approached Mr. Chen. "Sir, I want to apologize. I should have spoken up sooner when I realized what had happened." Mr. Chen nodded acknowledgement. "We all make mistakes. The important thing is recognizing them." A minute later, a flustered man in his 50s emerged from the back office, the assistant manager trailing behind him. The lounge manager extended his hand to Mr. Chen. "Mr. Chen, I cannot express how deeply sorry we are for this misunderstanding. Your wife is, of course, always welcome in our lounge. If you'll tell us where she is, we'll send someone to escort her back immediately." "I'll get her myself," Mr. Chen replied, not taking the offered hand. "But first, I'd like to understand how this happened." All eyes turned to the assistant manager, who looked like he might be sick. I didn't check her credentials properly," he admitted. "She wasn't dressed like our usual guests, and I assumed—" "You assumed," Mr. Chen repeated. "Based on a sweater and jeans. It was a terrible mistake," the lounge manager cut in. "One that will never happen again. We'll implement additional training immediately." Mr. Chen studied them both for a moment. "My wife values simplicity. She doesn't believe in wasting money on designer clothes or flashy jewelry just to impress strangers. That doesn't make her less deserving of respect." "Of course not," the lounge manager agreed quickly. "We completely understand." "I don't think you do," Mr. Chen said. "But perhaps this incident will help you start to." He turned to leave, the VIP liaison falling into step beside him. "Mr. Chen," the assistant manager called out desperately. "Will you be filing a formal complaint?" Mr. Chen paused at the door. "That depends on what my wife wants. Unlike some people, I actually listened to her." As they walked away from the lounge, the liaison glanced at Mr. Chen. "The airport director will want to personally apologize for this incident." "That won't be necessary," Mr. Chen replied. "I don't want special treatment because of who I am. I want better treatment for everyone regardless of who they are or what they're wearing." They made their way through the terminal toward the general waiting area. When they spotted the humble woman sitting quietly with her book, the VIP liaison held back, allowing Mr. Chen to approach his wife alone. She looked up as he neared, a smile spreading across her face. "I told you not to make a fuss," she said, standing to embrace him. "I didn't," he replied, returning her hug. "Much," she gave him a knowing look. "How bad was it?" "Not as bad as they deserved," he admitted. "Are you okay?" "I'm fine," she assured him. A little embarrassed, but fine. He picked up her small suitcase. "Our flight leaves soon. Do you want to go to the lounge now? They're suddenly very eager to have you as a guest." She laughed softly. "Actually, I met some interesting people out here. Did you know that woman over there is a retired teacher who taught for 40 years in rural communities? And that man by the window just published his first novel at age 67. The lounge is nice, but sometimes the real stories are out here." Mr. Chen smiled, not surprised by his wife's response. It was one of the many reasons he had fallen in love with her years ago, long before his company became successful. "Then let's stay here," he said, sitting down beside her in one of the hard plastic chairs. Across the terminal, the lounge manager and assistant manager watched in disbelief, as one of the world's richest men chose to sit in the general waiting area rather than return to the luxury of their lounge. "Should we send over some complimentary drinks?" the manager suggested nervously. The assistant manager shook his head, finally beginning to understand. "I think they're exactly where they want to be." Word traveled fast throughout Westfield International Airport. Staff members whispered to each other behind cupped hands, stealing glances at the couple sitting in the general waiting area. Thomas Chen, the tech visionary whose clean energy innovations had revolutionized 3 industries, was sitting on a standard plastic chair beside his wife, completely ignoring the frantic messages from the lounge manager offering private accommodations, complimentary champagne, and profuse apologies. The airport director, a tall woman with silver-streaked hair and 3 decades of experience handling VIP situations, emerged from her office the moment she heard what had happened. Her assistant hurried alongside her, briefing her on the situation in hushed tones as they made their way across the terminal. "How bad is it?" the director asked, straightening her blazer. "The lounge staff denied entry to Mrs. Chen because of how she was dressed," her assistant explained. "They didn't check her credentials and had security escort her out. Mr. Chen arrived about 40 minutes ago and confronted the lounge staff before choosing to sit with his wife in the general waiting area." The director winced. The Chens were not just wealthy. They were influential in ways that went beyond money. Thomas Chen's company had contracts with most major airports to install their revolutionary solar glass panels and energy storage systems. One word from him could delay projects worth millions. "Has legal been notified?" she asked. "Yes, they're preparing for potential fallout. PR is drafting a statement as well." The director nodded, taking a deep breath as they approached the famous couple. To her surprise, they looked completely at ease. Mrs. Chen was showing her husband something in her book, both of them smiling as if they were sitting in their own living room, rather than a crowded airport terminal. "Mr. and Mrs. Chen," the director said as she reached them. "I'm Diane Powell, the airport director. I want to personally express how deeply sorry we are for what happened today." Thomas looked up, his expression neutral. "Thank you, Director Powell. But an apology might be more meaningful if it were directed to my wife. She's the one who was mistreated." The director turned immediately to Mrs. Chen. "Ma'am, please accept my sincere apologies for the disrespect you were shown. It goes against everything this airport stands for, and I assure you that appropriate actions will be taken." Mrs. Chen smiled gently. "Thank you, but please don't be too harsh with your staff. We all make mistakes, and I'm sure the young man has learned his lesson." "That's very gracious of you," the director said, somewhat taken aback by her kindness. "Still, we'd like to make this right. We have a private lounge in the executive terminal that I'd be happy to escort you to right away." "Your flight doesn't leave for another 40 minutes, and actually," Mrs. Chen interrupted softly, "we're quite comfortable here." The director blinked in surprise, not used to having her offers of VIP treatment declined. "I understand, but I assure you the executive lounge offers complete privacy and—" "Director Powell," Thomas said, "my wife has expressed her preference. We'll stay here." The finality in his tone made it clear that the discussion was over. The director nodded, trying to hide her confusion. In her experience, wealthy people always wanted the most exclusive experiences available. "Of course. Is there anything else I can do to make your wait more comfortable?" Mrs. Chen glanced around the busy terminal. "Actually, those children over there seem to be struggling with boredom. Perhaps you could send someone to distribute some coloring books or games. I noticed your gift shop carries them." The director followed her gaze to where a harried mother was trying to entertain 3 restless children. "I'll see to it immediately," she promised, genuinely impressed by the request. As the director walked away, her assistant leaned closer. "Should we still offer them priority boarding?" "Yes," the director replied, "but something tells me they might decline that too." Across the terminal, the assistant manager from the Diamond Sky Lounge was having the worst day of his professional life. His manager had ordered him to stay in the back office until further notice, away from the eyes of other passengers and staff. He sat at a small desk filling out an incident report with trembling hands. The door opened, and the older receptionist entered with a cup of coffee. which she placed in front of him without a word. "Thanks," he muttered, not looking up. "You really messed up," she said simply. He nodded, his face flushed with shame. "I know, do you?" she asked, sitting in the chair across from him. "Because I'm not sure you understand what you did wrong." He looked up, defensive. "I didn't recognize one of our most important clients." "I get it," the older woman shook her head. "That's not the main problem. The problem is that you thought it was okay to treat anyone the way you treated her, famous or not." He stared at her, the realization slowly dawning on his face. "I've worked here for 17 years, she continued. "I've checked in celebrities, politicians, royalty. The truly impressive ones never need to announce themselves or dress to impress. They're secure enough to be themselves." She stood up, heading for the door. "Think about that while you finish your report." Back in the terminal, a staff member was distributing coloring books and small games to the children waiting nearby, much to their delight. The harried mother caught Mrs. Chen's eye and mouthed a grateful thank you, somehow sensing she was responsible for the unexpected kindness. Thomas checked his watch. "Our flight board's in 20 minutes. Mrs. Chen nodded, closing her book and tucking it into her bag. "It was a good book, but I think I'll save the rest for the plane." "Was it worth sitting out here instead of in the lounge?" Thomas asked, genuinely curious. She smiled. "Definitely. I had a lovely conversation with that elderly gentleman before you arrived. He's flying to see his first grandchild. And I helped that little boy find his father. Small moments, but meaningful ones." Thomas squeezed her hand. "You've always been good at finding value in unexpected places. It's how I found you, isn't it?" she teased. "A brilliant but scruffy engineer working out of a garage apartment." He laughed. "The best investment you ever made, according to Forbes." "I didn't marry your potential," she reminded him. "I married you. The man who stayed up all night to fix my father's old tractor when no one else would bother." Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a nervous-looking man in a pilot's uniform, followed by 2 flight attendants. "Mr. and Mrs. Chen," the pilot said with a respectful nod. "I'm Captain Rivera, the pilot for your flight to San Francisco. We want to personally welcome you aboard and escort you to the plane whenever you're ready." Thomas glanced at his wife, who gave a small nod. "Thank you, Captain. We appreciate the courtesy." As they stood to follow the flight crew, other travelers began to whisper and point. The couple either didn't notice or chose to ignore the attention, maintaining their conversation as they walked. The moment they were out of earshot, the terminal erupted with excited chatter. Phones appeared as people searched for information about the famous couple who had caused such a stir. Pictures snapped from a distance would soon make their way to social media, with captions about the billionaire who chose to sit in the regular terminal rather than accept VIP treatment. The VIP liaison, who had been watching from a discreet distance, approached Director Powell as she supervised the boarding process. "That could have gone much worse," the liaison commented. The director nodded. "Mrs. Chen is remarkably gracious considering how she was treated." "It's not surprising if you know anything about her," the liaison replied. Before she married him, she was a rural school teacher, grew up on a small farm, worked her way through college. Even after they became wealthy, she insisted on continuing to teach for several more years. "How do you know all this?" the director asked. The liaison smiled. "It's my job to know our VIPs. Mrs. Chen is known for her education foundation that focuses on rural and underprivileged communities. They've donated billions, but she insists on remaining hands-on with the projects. Very little fanfare, very big impact." The director watched as the Chens walked down the jetway, noting how Mrs. Chen stopped to help an elderly passenger who had dropped his boarding pass, while her billionaire husband patiently waited. "I think we all learned something valuable today," she said, as the couple finally boarded the plane and settled into their first-class seats. Mrs. Chen noticed her husband typing something on his tablet. "Work already?" she asked. "The plane hasn't even taken off." He turned the screen toward her. It was an email to their foundation director, outlining a new initiative for airport staff training programs focused on recognizing and avoiding bias based on appearance. "What do you think?" he asked. "Too petty?" She read it carefully before shaking her head. "Not petty at all, if the goal is to prevent others from experiencing what I did. But maybe we should expand it beyond airports, make it a broader initiative for service industries in general." Thomas smiled, already revising the email. "This is why I run all my ideas past you first." As the plane prepared for takeoff, The Diamond Sky Lounge was undergoing its own transformation. The lounge manager had called an emergency staff meeting, and all employees were gathered in the main seating area, which had been temporarily closed to passengers. Today, we failed not just in our service to an important client, but in our basic human decency, the manager began. This isn't just about losing the Chen account or the potential PR disaster. It's about remembering why we're here in the first place, to create a welcoming space for all our legitimate members, regardless of how they choose to present themselves. The assistant manager stood in the back, his head bowed in shame. Starting tomorrow, the manager continued, we're implementing new protocols. Every membership card will be scanned, no exceptions. Every guest will be treated with the same level of respect, regardless of their appearance. He paused, looking around the room. And if I ever hear of anyone being escorted out without proper verification again, that person will be escorted out of a job. Is that clear? The staff nodded solemnly, the lesson of the day having made a deep impression on everyone. As the Chen's plane soared into the clouds, leaving Westfield International behind, the ripple effects of that morning's events were just beginning to spread. Sometimes the most powerful statements come not from confrontation, but from quiet dignity in the face of prejudice. A lesson that one humble woman in worn jeans and a simple sweater had taught an entire airport without saying a word. By late afternoon, what had started as a private incident at Westfield International Airport had begun to spread across social media. A passenger waiting near the Chens had recognized Thomas and discreetly recorded part of the airport director's apology. Within hours, the video had accumulated thousands of shares, along with comments praising the billionaire couple for choosing to remain in the general terminal rather than accepting special treatment. The Chens themselves were blissfully unaware of their growing internet fame as their plane touched down in San Francisco. They collected their modest luggage and made their way toward the exit, discussing dinner plans like any ordinary couple. Let's try that new Vietnamese restaurant near the apartment, Mrs. Chen suggested as they walked through the arrival terminal. The one the housekeeper recommended, Thomas nodded. Sounds perfect. Should we call for the car or just grab a rideshare? Before she could answer, they were approached by an airport official wearing a San Francisco International badge. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, the woman said with a bright smile. I'm Beverly, head of customer relations. We'd like to offer you our VIP escort service to your vehicle. The couple exchanged a quick glance. That's very kind, Mrs. Chen replied, but we haven't arranged for a car yet. We were just going to take a rideshare. Beverly's smile didn't falter. We'd be happy to arrange private transportation for you. Compliments of the airport. Thomas raised an eyebrow. That's unusually generous. May I ask why? Beverly hesitated, her professional demeanor momentarily cracking. Well, to be honest, sir, we received a call from Westfield International. They suggested we might want to ensure you had a positive experience here. I see, Thomas said, understanding immediately. News travels fast. Word of the incident has circulated, Beverly admitted. We want to assure you that San Francisco International values all our passengers equally, regardless of appearance. Mrs. Chen smiled gently. That's good to hear, but we truly don't need special treatment. We're perfectly capable of making our own arrangements. Beverly looked genuinely disappointed. Is there anything at all we can do for you? Mrs. Chen thought for a moment. Actually, yes. That elderly gentleman over there seems to be having trouble with his bags. Perhaps you could assist him instead. Beverly followed her gaze to where an older man was struggling with a heavy suitcase. Of course, Mrs. Chen, right away. As Beverly hurried off to help the elderly passenger, Thomas squeezed his wife's hand. You're going to single-handedly revolutionize customer service if you keep this up. She laughed softly. I just think help should go to those who need it most, not those who have the most. Meanwhile, back at Westfield International, the fallout from the morning's events was still unfolding. The lounge manager had called an emergency meeting with the head of customer service, the training department director, and the airport's legal counsel. The video has over 50,000 views already, the customer service head reported grimly, turning her tablet around to show the others. Comments are mostly supportive of the Chens and critical of us. The legal counsel adjusted his glasses as he studied the screen. Fortunately, there's no clear identification of our staff member, though people are certainly trying to figure out who it was. What's our exposure here? The lounge manager asked. Legally? Minimal, the counsel replied. But from a PR perspective, this could be significant. The Chens are widely respected not just for their wealth, but for their philanthropic work. Mrs. Chen in particular has a reputation for being down to earth despite their fortune. The training director, who had been quietly taking notes, finally spoke up. I think we're missing the bigger picture here. This isn't just about damage control. It's about making sure something like this never happens again. All eyes turned to her. I've been reviewing our training materials, she continued. We spend 3 days teaching staff about premium services, loyalty tiers, and how to recognize and cater to VIPs. We spend exactly 20 minutes on the importance of treating all customers with respect. The room fell silent as her words sank in. Maybe this incident is a wake-up call, she suggested, a chance to re-examine our priorities. In the back office of the Diamond Sky Lounge, the assistant manager was clearing out his desk. After completing the incident report, he'd been informed that he was being placed on administrative leave pending a full review. Everyone knew what that really meant. The older receptionist appeared in the doorway, watching him pack his personal items into a small box. So they're letting you go, she said. It wasn't a question. He nodded, not meeting her eyes. 2 weeks' pay and a formal reprimand in my file. She entered the room, closing the door behind her. Do you understand why? Because I embarrassed the airport in front of an important client, he muttered. No, she said firmly. Because you failed to do the most fundamental part of your job, treating people with basic dignity and respect. He finally looked up at her, his expression a mix of shame and defensiveness. I was just trying to maintain the standards of the lounge. You know how many people try to sneak in. And you know how easy it is to simply check someone's credentials, she countered. The truth is, you made assumptions based on her appearance, and you were too arrogant to verify whether those assumptions were correct. He had no response to that. I've been doing this job for almost 2 decades, she continued, her voice softening slightly. Want to know what I've learned? The truly special people, the ones who've earned their success through hard work and talent, they rarely need to show off. It's usually the people most desperate to be seen as important who make the biggest fuss about status. She placed something on his desk, a printout of a news article from several years ago. It showed a picture of Mrs. Chen at the opening of a rural school, surrounded by children, wearing jeans and a simple sweater not unlike the one she'd had on that morning. Learn from this, the receptionist said simply, before turning to leave. The assistant manager picked up the article and began to read. As evening fell in San Francisco, the Chens were enjoying their dinner at the small Vietnamese restaurant tucked away in a quiet neighborhood. The place was family-owned with just 10 tables and no reservation system. They'd waited 20 minutes for a table like everyone else, chatting with other customers and admiring the family photos on the walls. This pho is amazing, Thomas said between spoonfuls of the fragrant broth. Your housekeeper has good taste. She always knows the best places, his wife agreed. Places most food critics never find. Their peaceful dinner was interrupted when Thomas's phone began buzzing repeatedly. He frowned as he checked the screen. Everything okay? His wife asked. Just the PR team. Apparently we're trending. He turned the phone to show her the social media posts and news articles that had begun to appear, all focused on the airport incident. Her eyes widened as she scrolled through the headlines. Billionaire stands up to airport elitism. Tech mogul chooses regular terminal over VIP treatment after wife mistreated. And Chen Shou's class has nothing to do with clothes. Oh dear, she murmured. This isn't what I wanted at all. Thomas took back his phone. People are inspired by it. You can't blame them. But that poor young man at the lounge, they're calling for him to be fired. He was incredibly rude to you, Thomas reminded her. He made a mistake, she said. A foolish one, yes, but firing him won't teach him anything useful. Thomas studied his wife thoughtfully. After 14 years of marriage, she could still surprise him with her compassion. What would you suggest instead? He asked. She considered this as she took a sip of her tea. Education, training, a chance to learn and do better. Thomas nodded slowly, then began typing on his phone. What are you doing? She asked. Calling off the dogs, he replied. I'm sending a message to our foundation director and our PR team. We're going to turn this into something positive. While the Chens worked on their impromptu plan, the former assistant manager of the Diamond Sky Lounge was sitting in his apartment. scrolling through the same articles and social media posts. Each one felt like another blow to his already wounded pride. Worse than the public humiliation was the growing realization that the older receptionist had been right. He had failed at the most basic level of human decency. On impulse, he opened his laptop and began typing an email to the airport director. He had no expectation that it would be read, but he needed to express his regret in his own words, not just through the formal apology the HR department had drafted for him. "I made a terrible mistake today," he wrote, "not because Mrs. Chen turned out to be the wife of a famous billionaire, but because I failed to treat another human being with the respect she deserved. I let superficial judgments cloud my professionalism, and in doing so, I not only embarrassed the airport but betrayed my own values." He continued writing late into the night, the words flowing more easily as he confronted his mistakes honestly for the first time. The next morning, as the Chens prepared for their meetings in the city, Mrs. Chen's phone pinged with a notification. It was from their foundation director, sending a link to a new statement that had been posted on Thomas Chen's official social media accounts. "Yesterday, my wife experienced discrimination based on her appearance at Westfield International Airport. While the incident was unfortunate, we believe it highlights an opportunity for positive change. Rather than calling for punitive actions against individuals, we are announcing a new initiative through the Chen Foundation focused on bias training and education for customer service professionals across all industries. We invite Westfield International to be our first partner in this initiative, turning an uncomfortable moment into a chance for growth and learning." Within minutes, Westfield International's official account had responded with enthusiasm, accepting the offer and pledging to revamp their training programs completely. Mrs. Chen smiled as she showed the exchange to her husband. "This is perfect. Thank you. I just put our resources behind your idea," he replied. "That's always been our best partnership model." As they headed out for their day, neither of them could have anticipated how their simple act of forgiveness would resonate. By choosing compassion over retribution, they had transformed a moment of disrespect into an opportunity for widespread change, proving once again that true class has nothing to do with clothes, wealth or status, and everything to do with how you treat others when no one is watching.